Andrew, we're terribly excited about your campaign at the station. It couldn't have come at a better time. Pets have been even more important to people during lockdown and have provided immense emotional support during this awful time, providing good mental health outcomes for many. In modern society, dogs and cats have become family and deserve to have recognition for that. Now, you agree with that, don't you?
Oh, I agree 100% with that. A dog, in fact, any animal becomes really an equal member of your family. And if you lose it, it's almost like a bereavement. And the prospect of having to move home and then give up your animal, I can't think of anything more horrific for the trauma that the animal will go through in losing that connection with its owner, but also the owner in losing that beloved pet. So the law has to change. There has to be some alteration to the way we do things. So many animals are abandoned, and this cannot go on. That's why I'm putting this law forward, and I hope the government will take note, and I hope the law is going to change.
Yes, well, so do we. We're totally behind you. Now, our sole objective at the station is to promote organisations that work to create better environments for people and animals. And we work closely with many animal welfare organisations. Now, recently we spoke to Linda Goodman from Cariad, who voiced concerns that as dog ownership has risen, there is an increased risk that more dogs will be turned over to rescue due to these no pet clauses. The smaller rescues may have to turn them away, resulting in those dogs being put to sleep. Now, landlords have the opportunity to stop that happening, don't they, Andrew?
Yes, they do. And I regret that it's necessary to have to bring this bill to Parliament, because landlords could use their own judgment now. There doesn't need to be a change in the law if landlords agreed to follow a much more reasonable, flexible policy of allowing animals, unless, of course, an animal is causing damage or disturbance and the owner is not responsible. Of course, there needs to be some comeback if that happens. But in the vast majority of cases, the animal causes no problem. In fact, many occasions, I know plenty of these occasions, where the animal may live in a particular flat and is adored by the people that live in the other flats as well. Yes. So that the animal brings joy to not just the owner, but the people that live in the other accommodation nearby. So these blanket no pet rules are frankly wrong, outdated and counterproductive. And I hope that every landlord listening to this interview and maybe have heard about my bill will actually think to themselves, do I need this blanket policy? Can I even immediately change the restrictions to allow more people to keep the animals that they love?
Yes, it's quite interesting, Andrew. I spoke to Jordan quite recently, as you know, Jasmine's owner, and we kind of thought that perhaps landlords were possibly missing out on some very, very good tenants because of this policy that they have.
Oh, it's completely right. I mean, it's almost like they've blindly adopted this rule without really giving it thought. And I think that you're totally correct that many landlords could be missing out on very good tenants. I find that people that own animals are they're good people usually. I mean, you get some bad ones, we all know that, but they're usually good people. As an MP, to give an example, I speak to dog owners all the time when I'm out walking out and about. And I think people that own an animal have a certain responsibility and they have a caring attitude. And I think that, okay, there are going to be some selfish dog owners that aren't going to care, and those people are not the same as the majority. Yeah. So I think that they are missing out on good tenants. They're missing out on having a good relationship with people that live in their flats. Because imagine you moving into a flat and your landlord has just barred you from having the animal that you love, and you've had to give that animal away. You're not going to be very happy about that landlord, are you? You're not going to
not at all
love that landlord too much.
Yes, and you possibly won't stay very long, Andrew. You'll always be looking for somewhere that will accept you with your pet, because they are out there as well. We can't be unkind to all landlords, because some of them are really very good with this, aren't they? We have to remember that.
Totally right. So they will lose tenants because you want to own that creature, get the animal back or get a new one, whatever. And so, yeah, you're right. People could actually leave the accommodation and the landlord has to find yet another tenant.
Yeah. Now, of course, Jasmine's law has no intention of treating anybody unfairly, does it, including landlords? And it actually intends to promote responsible ownership, doesn't it, Andrew? There will be criteria for the pet and the owner to meet. Could you just briefly explain that to listeners, please?
Well, first of all, if you own an animal, wherever you live, even if it's in your private house, I believe that everyone has a responsibility to look after that animal and to be a responsible owner. So there are, of course, animal welfare laws in this country, but in terms of those who are tenants, if you want to bring an animal with you to the place that you're going to live in, you should be able to do that as of right, unless you breach certain criteria. And that would be that you are not a responsible owner, you do not ensure your animal is cared for and looked after and treated, given the inoculations that it needs. And to prove that you are a responsible owner, anyone that moves into accommodation should be able to provide a certificate from a registered vet to ensure that you have a record of being a responsible owner. Now, of course, it's not going to cover all eventualities. There are going to be things that happen. So at the end of the day, yes, of course, a landlord is entitled to expect, if there are damage caused by an animal in whatever form, for the owner of that creature to compensate the landlord. Of course, that should be there as well. But I think that the vast majority of cases, this would not be necessary. It's only a tiny minority where you get any sort of problem. So I think that there should be criteria, and people should realise that just bringing an animal without care and attention of what that animal will do and how that animal's looked after, that's not acceptable. But I think the vast majority of cases, you will have responsible owners and they will ensure that the animal behaves in an appropriate fashion.
Yeah, we should just very quickly talk about street sleepers as well, shouldn't we, Andrew, before we say goodbye to each other, because many people stay on the streets only because any accommodation that they're offered has a no pets caveat. And faced with that awful decision of choosing between their only constant companions through those very difficult times and a roof over their heads, they choose the animals, don't they?
Indeed, and there could be nothing more tragic than if you've been on the streets, you've been homeless, you've had a dog, a companion that's been with you all that time. All of a sudden, you've got the opportunity to move into accommodation, you've been offered a flat by a council or housing association or a charity or something. And then they turn around and say, but you've got to get rid of your animal. I mean, that's an awful predicament to put someone in. And we know of people that have committed suicide because of this. This is not right. It is unnecessary. And we need to change this approach, and we need to do it now. We don't need to wait for this law to become an act of parliament. If it ever does, what we need is a change of attitude by landlords. I'm proud to say my own local council is the London Borough of Havering, and they have a pets welcome policy. So all animals that live in the council accommodation, as long as they're not a nuisance and their owner's responsible, then no animal is turfed out on the street. So I hope all councils will adopt that policy, all housing associations and all private landlords.
Yes, well, of course, and they've proven that it works, don't they? So it can definitely be done. Now, the bill has its second reading in January. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, it does. I think it's the 29th of January.
Okay. Before we go, I just also want to say thank you so very much for including microchipping, the compulsory scanning of microchips in this. We're massive supporters of Debbie Matthews and her Vets Get Scanning campaign, and we're, turning cartwheels and somersaults when we heard you saying that. So thank you so much. And thank you for getting behind this, because it's a phenomenal campaign. It's super important. As I was saying, during these very difficult times, people need to stay with their pets. We don't want things to get worse, do we? There are things that we can do to make a positive change. So thank you so very much for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Andrew.
Thank you. And thank you for your support and all your kind words. And
you're very welcome.
We'll carry on the campaign for Jasmine's Law.